Hi everyone, this is Rohit from Lifestyle Mastery, and today I'm excited to have Roshan Gupta, who's the founder of Amplify PM, which transforms product managers into product leaders. He's an ex-product head at Google and Meta. Welcome to the show, Roshan.
Thank you for having me. I
Awesome.
appreciate
So
it.
you've had quite a journey. You worked at Google and Meta, but how did you get your start in this world of product management?
Yeah. So I, graduated with a degree in computer science. So I took like a common path where I was a software engineer for a while,
Yeah.
and I loved it. It was incredibly fun to be an engineer and to build things. But I started to learn about product, and it suited me better. My curiosity, my need for variety, liking to look at things from the big picture. And at the time, and what I think a lot of PMs or people who want to aspiring PMs have trouble with is
Yeah.
breaking into product management. So I remember I jumped around a lot. I left Oracle and joined Yahoo in the hopes of becoming a product manager. Eventually, I joined a startup. And again, as an engineer, and I was doing such a good job, at least I think so, that they wanted me to stay as a software engineer. And so finally, I had to threaten to leave and say,
Yeah.
look, I came here to be a PM. And so they finally gave me a shot. I did well, and the rest is history.
Interesting. I moved before the call. I talked about how I moved from India to UK in the middle of COVID. But you also made a big jump in the last couple of years. I think it was in 2022 that you moved from Portugal to US. So how
That's right.
sorry, from US to Portugal. So how's the ecosystem like? Is it quite different from US? And what's been your experience like out here?
Yeah, it's interesting, the ecosystem here. So, I was in Silicon Valley for a long time, and this was back in the day when you were a product manager, and the only thing available to you was
Yeah.
Marty Kagan's Inspired. And so I kind of grew up as product grew up in Silicon Valley, and so product is such a
Mm.
strong part of that culture. When I came to Portugal, I spoke at a couple conferences. I've been participating in the community. And what I've discovered is there's a huge hunger for product here. And it didn't really exist until I'd say the last,
Mm.
2 or 3 years. So it's interesting because I think product
Yeah.
can be a disruptor here. They're basically starting from fresh. They have no notion of product, so they have all the latest advancements. Along with Marty Kagan's book, they have like so
Yeah.
many people posting content. So I think it'll be interesting to see how product evolves here when they sort of start fresh with the latest advancements. But I'd say the other thing that I noticed here is there's so much
Yeah.
information on product these days that in some
Mm.
ways it can be overwhelming. And so, I'd say there's a hunger here for product. People are eager to learn. They take advantage of all the information out there. But remains to be seen how they turn that into,
Mm.
forward progress.
Got it. And I never had a chance to get an interview at Google, but you had worked at Google. You managed a huge team of around 300 plus people. What were some of the crucial mindset shifts that you had to make when you're working as a PM and that too when you move to a product leader role?
Yeah, yeah. So I joined Google back in 2016 and grew over there, and then eventually took over
Okay.
the Google Messages team. So I had about 8 or 9 product managers working for me, but the org that basically I oversaw was 300 people, huge budget. It was incredible, one of the best experiences. Going from a product manager to a product leader, there are a couple of mindset
Mm.
shifts I had to make. And I've written about this before, so I'll kind of walk through some of the key ones that I
Mm.
found to be the most profound shifts. One is you shift from a team
Mm.
focus to a company focus. And so when you're a product manager, you're really focused
Yeah.
on having your team succeed. But as a product leader, it's really about the company succeeding. and the entire org succeeding. And so, it's a different set of trade-offs you make when you're looking at that wider lens. I tell PMs, start to ask yourself, is this the right decision for the company instead of is this the right decision for my team? Another thing I had to do was letting go of doing everything myself. I can't help it. I jump in
Yeah.
and execute. But I had to shift to empowering. I had to learn to trust my team, let go. I'd still,
Yeah.
trust but verify. But as I scaled, I had to let my team, take on a lot of the work and trust them. And that's interesting, actually. Speaking of scale, a big shift I made was going from leading team members to
Okay.
leading team leaders. And I remember, I'm sure a lot of PMs, like you're overwhelmed, there's a lot of work, day to day work. And I would look at these leaders and I couldn't understand how they could handle more work because, I was overwhelmed just trying to lead my team. And I finally, I just realized one day, they're leading orgs, I'm leading teams. And it dawned on me, they're leading orgs. Like they've set up layers and structure. And so, a big change for me at Google was I just decided to add layers to my team. At the time, I was running a team of like 70 or 80 engineers. So I started nominating team leads and meeting with them more frequently and, with the rest of
Yeah.
the folks less frequently. No one gave me permission. I just
Yeah.
started leading team leaders. And it's how I scale. But that was a big shift. Let's see. Another one I think that is pretty profound is I found myself shifting from problems to people. And the way I like to talk about it now is I use the analogy of the
Yeah.
golden goose and the golden egg. And so I think when you're a product manager, you're really focused on the golden egg. Like you want to achieve some significant milestones, some significant win for your team, for the company. But as a product leader, I had to shift my thinking because I knew that yes, there's some problems we need to overcome now, but there's so many
Yeah.
milestones yet to come. And so I didn't want just the next golden egg. I wanted a healthy golden goose who can get me lots of
Yeah.
golden eggs into the future. And so I found myself shifting into, do I have the right team in place? Am I nurturing the team? Am I nurturing the health of my golden goose so I can get lots of golden eggs? So that shift to people instead of problems is something you'll discover as a leader. And I think if I had to pick one more, one of the things I realized was I no longer optimize for speed as a leader. I
Okay.
optimize for predictability. And so when I ran a team, I had certain milestones I wanted to hit. And the faster I hit those milestones, the better it was for
Yeah.
me and the better it was for my team. But when I was a leader, I realized I had, massive marketing efforts and budgets to coordinate. I had to predict headcount needs, months or quarters in advance. I needed to scale up infrastructure just in time. So I wasn't overpaying for something that, we didn't need right away, but I wasn't, paying for it too late. And so I discovered as a product leader, I actually valued predictability more. So if a team told me they could get something done by a certain time, even if maybe they could get it done sooner, I valued the teams that consistently delivered when they said they would over the teams that occasionally delivered fast and other times missed the mark. So I'd say those are just a couple of examples of some of the
Yeah.
shifts I had to go through and learn to go from being a PM to a
Interesting.
product leader.
In the last couple of weeks, I've read a book called NVIDIA Way, because Jensen has become so popular. I think one thing he
Yeah.
mentioned, which was quite unique from other leaders, how they manage, is he doesn't have one to one, and he has, I think, 60 or 80 people who have, I mean, he has direct reports. So a very unique way of quite different from what uh, yeah. Well, I was just
Yeah.
wondering, what are your thoughts? Should people have more one-on-ones with their teams, or is it, is a different style of leadership?
I think as a product leader, the more you can meet with people, the better. But let's be honest, when I was, running an org that had 300 people working on the product I was leading, there's absolutely no way I can meet with
Yeah.
everybody one on one. It's impossible. And so I think that, one of the things I'm very passionate about that is a core strength of mine is storytelling
Yeah.
and persuasive storytelling. And I think, when you're a leader, you can't, I tell people you can't lead 100 people the same way you lead 10. It's a totally different skill set. And when you're a leader, it becomes about your ability to rally large groups of people with the strength of your message because you
Yeah.
can't meet with everyone one on one. So I'd say as a leader, you have to evolve your communication. You have to be really
Yeah.
good at persuading people and rallying people at
Got it.
scale.
And you have worked with a lot of PMs. What core skills do you think the best PMs have? And what's the difference now do you find between a good PM and somebody who can really become a great PM?
Yeah. You know, I think this reminds me of a workshop
Yeah.
I attended when I was at Google. It was people may have heard of it. It's called Search Inside Yourself. It's pretty popular and I think now people can take it outside of Google. But I remember an exercise that made a huge impact on me. And they had us, all shout out the words that came to mind when we thought of great leaders. And so people just started shouting out different words. And then they stepped back and we looked at the board, and almost all the words were soft skills, like decisive or
Yeah.
charismatic or persuasive. And I think there's nothing, along the lines of like industry expert or, any of those hard skills that some
Yeah.
people think you need to have as a leader. And so I'd say, PMs are leaders. I mean, from day one, it's a definition of what we do. And so I think those soft skills are often what makes the difference between a good PM and a great PM. So like your communication ability, your ability to delegate and get people excited, to do the work, ability to persuade, your ability to have empathy, build trust. And it kind of makes sense. We talked about as you grow, you can't
Yeah.
meet with everybody one on one. So it's really about your ability to create high performing teams and manage people and be people focused if you really want to be a great PM and eventually a great product leader. So I think for me, when I hire PMs, if I see curiosity, if I see humbleness, if I see them asking questions and wanting to learn, that's a leading indicator for me that PM will do well.
Got it. And you mentioned about communicating with your team, but how do the best teams and PM leaders communicate with your teams in your experience?
Yeah. So I mean,
Yeah.
this is near and dear to my heart because storytelling is something that, in my opinion, it's the number one skill for product
Yeah.
managers and leaders that I don't think anybody really teaches. So I like to sum it up in one sentence, actually. Great communication is about focusing your audience on a compelling message that they can trust. And what I mean by that is that, your audience, whoever they are, whether it's a one-on-one or a group or an entire org, they have to understand your message, they have to care about your
Yeah.
message, and they have to believe it. And so, for example, focus your audience, focus, there's a
Yeah.
saying, clear as kind. So, remove anything that takes away from your main point. You just want to focus on your key message and everything else is a distraction. But then there's how do you make your message compelling? And, the worst is when I see product managers, standing up there making a presentation and people are distracted. They're looking at their phones, they're not paying attention. It pains me to see that. The truth is, just because you're presenting doesn't mean your audience is going to give you their
Yeah.
attention. You have to make them care. So you have to find their why. Tie your message to something they care deeply about. But I think a more subtle thing when it comes to making people care is
Yeah.
emotions are contagious. So humans tend to mimic the behavior and the
Yeah.
energy of the person in front of them. So I often tell the people I coach, find your why as well. Like you have to be really excited about your story
Yeah.
and why you're telling it if you want that excitement to be in your audience. And then I'd say the last thing is trust. So you can have, two people come to you with the exact same pitch, but if one is trustworthy, they get things done on time, they communicate well, and the other one, misses goals or doesn't always get things done when they say they will, could be the exact same content, but if you don't trust someone, the entire thing falls apart. And so, I think the key point there for leaders is that building trust isn't something you just do in one shot. It's a accumulation of all your actions over time, and it's hard to build and it's easy to break. So you have to be very deliberate about building that trust. But those are the three things for great communication: is focusing your audience, on a compelling message that they care about and that they can
Got
trust.
interesting. And, I've been on the revenue side of the business, and we're supposed to create like a 30, 60, 90-day plan when we, get on with the new client. But for product managers, what does the first 30 days look like for new PMs, and what do they need to do to make that sort of impact?
Yeah, this is interesting because I've seen senior leaders, like very senior leaders, make this mistake that almost everybody makes, and it
Okay.
always backfires. And they join a team or they join an org, and they immediately jump in and they start pointing out flaws or improvements or
Okay.
making changes. And like it almost always comes from a good place. They're driven by a desire to show they're adding value, show like they were the right hire for the job. But man, it always backfires. It's basically telling the team, I just joined and I don't trust what you've done up until this point, and therefore I need to come in and change things. So for me, there is the whole 30, 60, 90-day plan, but like my first 30 days is all about listening and understanding. And one of the things I tell the clients I coach, like, when you're a product leader or a product manager, you're responsible for your team's trajectory. But to have a trajectory, you need two data points. So what's happening now, but you need to know where they started from. And if you know where they started from and where they are now you can get a good sense of where they're going. And so, if you just look at where they are now, of course, sometimes there are mistakes or things they could be doing better, but they may have come from a deep, dark hole. And really, like where they've gotten to today is a tremendous representation of their abilities. So I'd say the first 30 days, like
Yeah.
listen, seek to understand, and then move forward.
Got it. And since you've hired a lot of PMs in the companies that you work for, what's been the biggest sign that a new PM is not going to work out?
Yeah. So that same critical mistake. I mean, the reason it's a mistake is it's about the first impression, and nobody wants to hear their first impression's a lasting impression. But I'll say it's very tough to shake
Okay.
that first impression. And so, if I'll listen to what their teams and peers are saying, and that's usually a pretty good indication of how that PM will do. I think another sign is, ego on the part of the PMs or an unwillingness to ask for help. I mean, nobody joins a new role and
Yeah.
just immediately crushes it. You don't have the context. You can't. And so, if you're a PM who joins my team and you're not out there seeking to understand building context because you have an ego or because maybe you're afraid to look like you don't know what you're doing, like to me, that's a red flag.
Got it. And I connected with you a couple of months back. I think you were on Akarsh's a newsletter, and I happened to go through
Yeah.
the content which you created for storytelling. I found it fascinating because I think storytelling is not only crucial for product leaders but also for commercial leaders, right? So you've helped PMs use storytelling, and it's a very critical skill for them. But why do you think storytelling is so important for product as well as for commercial leaders?
Yeah. I mean, the truth is, storytelling is important for literally every function out there. And especially as transition into leadership roles, it's, again, my
Yeah.
opinion, the number one skill. Let me talk about product managers and product leaders. And I kind of mentioned some of this, but let's just look at the definition of a product manager. Yeah, we've all seen those Venn diagrams where it's like the business, the tech team, customers, and the PM sits in the middle. But if we're all being honest with ourselves, it's like 1,000 different Venn diagrams all merging, and the PM's in the middle of, legal, HR, finance, UX, user research, engineering, customers, stakeholders. So it's the PM's job by definition to be able to translate between all these different parties. And again, the whole saying is PMs don't lead by authority. We have to lead by influence. So just purely by the definition of what product folks do, the number one skill is your ability to persuade and communicate and translate and tell stories between these parties. I mentioned you can't lead 100 people the same way you lead 10. And again, when I was running that 300 plus org, like I
Yeah.
can't meet with everybody one on one. And so my success as a leader comes down to my ability to rally large groups of people to action with the strength of my message. And then the other interesting thing is, I think it's really important for leaders to be very good at storytelling because we have to help our teams tell their stories. And so often you'll be in a meeting and someone's presenting to you and you have to be able to in real time listen to what they're saying, organize it into a coherent narrative and kind of replay it back to them. And the leaders that can do that are the ones that, people leave meetings with you, much more clear on what's happening, what they're doing. So you have to be really good at storytelling, but not just for yourself, but to be able to help your teams tell better stories in return. So storytelling is how you build high
Yeah,
performing
no, absolutely. I
teams.
think I recently listened to a podcast by Scott Galloway, who's like one of the a very influential podcaster and media person, and he said that. And somebody asked him, "What's the most important trait that you can give to your kids?" And he said, "It's not wealth; it's storytelling." So I was like quite impressed by what he mentioned, right?
Yeah.
And how
Yeah.
do you develop that skill of breaking down very complex issues, especially if you're working in in complex environments, be it with AI product companies, and how do you then break it down to very clear, actionable narratives? And what advice would
Yeah.
you give to leaders who struggle with communicating very clearly?
Yeah. So two things. One is
Yeah.
how did I develop this skill? So it's funny you mentioned teaching your kids. My parents taught me by saying no to almost all the toys I wanted. And so, I would find really creative ways to bug my parents for the latest toy. And I think I learned to, tell creative stories that way. But the truth is, I just learned the hard way. And that's actually what I think 99% of us do, which is just trial and error and observation. And it takes a long time. But I noticed as I honed my skill, like it made a huge impact on my career. It was outsized. And in fact, in my promotion rationale at Google, storytelling was explicitly cited as a major reason for my promotion. And so, I developed it the hard way, but my advice to PMs is you don't have to. You can learn it. And, I'm so passionate about this. I left Google and created a whole course around this, teaching what I know. But even if you don't do the course, do your own research. But it's a skill you can learn. You don't have to be born a great storyteller. I think you were also asking, how could
Yeah.
people develop this skill or what's
True.
like maybe a framework
True.
they could use? Okay, so an analogy I like to give is think about how Hollywood
Okay.
tells its stories. And so, the number one mistake I see product folks make when they're asked to tell a story is like how many of us have opened up, PowerPoint or Google Slides and said, "Oh, I'll put together a skeleton deck." And you just start making slides. And that's the equivalent of a director being asked to make a movie and they just whip out
Yeah.
their camera and start filming. It's going to be a horrible movie. And so,
Yeah.
directors start with a script. But actually, there's a step before the script. They don't just start writing the script. They create something called a script outline. And the script outline outlines the key, characters in the movie, the key plot points, what the audience should take away, what they should feel. And if they do a really good job on the script outline, then they can make a really compelling script. And then they can film the movie. And there's actually a fourth step that I like to talk about, which is you could have the most amazing movie, but if you're in the theater and the lights are too bright or the sound volume's low or the popcorn's stale, it's still not going to land well. And so, you also have to make sure that delivering that content, delivering the movie, that theater experience is great. And so what I say is, for product folks, you can follow a similar four-step process. So I teach something called a story map, which is like a script outline. It's, outlining your story and the key takeaways for your audience and, the key plot points and proof points. Yeah, and then I walk them through how to create, the narrative, which is the script, how to create the deck, which is the movie, and then the most important, how do you deliver it and own the room with your message. So I'll just say you can build these stories in a systematic way. You don't have to start from a blank page every time. And hopefully that analogy will help some
Got it.
folks
Got it.
out.
Interesting. And do you have like a framework for helping product managers showcase their achievements? Do you think like keeping a note of what they've done during the quarter or year helps? What's been your framework like?
Yeah, so to showcase their achievements, I mean, there's the storytelling I just talked about, but that's usually to persuade an audience to, adopt a certain point of view. If we're talking about showcasing achievements, there are a lot of ways to get visibility, but I'm going to share, I think, the one that I think is underrated, but extremely powerful. And it feels amazing to do it. It's like win, win,
Okay.
win, win, win situation. And it's basically this. My biggest advice, if you
Yeah.
want to get credit for what you've done, is to give credit to others. So PMs worry like, oh, if I, give credit to other people for, achieving a lot of the milestones that, have been happening, it takes away from my credit. It doesn't. It just grows the pie. If your team succeeds, you succeed, even more as a product leader. And so, I just do it in a simple way, and I do this on a regular basis. I remind myself every couple of weeks. If like a team member achieves like a big milestone or even just overcomes some gnarly problem, I'll send a thank you email to their manager. I'll CC the actual team member and my manager as well. And I'll basically say, hey, this person did an amazing job. It had this impact. It's awesome. And I just wanted you guys to know it. And it's kind of amazing because the team member feels incredible that they're being recognized. Their manager feels incredible because it pumps them up. It's their team. And then it also gives visibility to my manager when I do it. And often these kind of thank you emails get forwarded up the chain. And trust me, the product manager and the product leader gets credit if the team does well, because ultimately we're responsible for the product. So I'd say that's my biggest advice. Like if you want to increase the credit you're getting, be generous and give credit to others.
Got interesting. And PMs often hit career roadblocks due to some missing leadership skills. You did talk about storytelling, but are there other skills also do you find which are critical?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And this is, something I teach to my clients in my program. So there's, how to persuade and influence. It's such a
Yeah.
key skill for product leaders. But like another one is how to scale. And so, I saw so many great product managers that I was, managing
Yeah.
at Google or other places who were amazing. And then they wanted more scope. And then the way they dealt with the scope was they just worked more hours. And like, that's just a recipe for burnout. And so you can't scale to lead 100 people the same way you scale to lead 10 or 20 or 30. It's a just fundamentally different way of scaling. And so I think that's one of the leadership skills that people have to learn is how to scale. And again, this is a skill nobody teaches. So the people who figure it out get to move up. And the ones who don't, they get left behind. Another example is how to think strategically. So, as you become a leader, you go from execution focus to strategic focus. And so they say, oh, if you want to get promoted, you got to be more strategic. Okay, but how? It feels like a mystical power, or some ambiguous talent because nobody teaches you how to be strategic. But like any skill, it can be learned. One way I start to get my clients to think bigger, it's simple 3 questions. Like, what
Yeah.
would you do if you weren't afraid? Just that question, you'd be surprised at how people start coming up with pretty incredible, amazing ideas if they take the fear out of it. And then after they, come up with something they would do if they weren't afraid, if they knew that it would be successful, say, okay, well, what would you do next? And then after that, say, well, what would you do next? And then the last question would be, but what if? So, but what if this happened? What would you do? And that's basically strategic thinking, which is think bigger, think about the opportunity space,
Okay.
don't be afraid, then think a couple steps ahead and then anticipate the risks. So that's an example of, a skill that, is missing and nobody teaches, but can be taught. And there are other ones like, how to network and build relationships. As you get into leadership, you have to build a strong personal brand internally and externally, especially if you want to
Yeah.
make moves to other companies. So those are just some of the examples of leadership skills that you need to ascend the ranks
Got it.
on the PM
And
ladder.
Roshan, you've been successful in with your storytelling course, and you've also launched fast track to your product leader course. Just wanted to touch base on that. What key skills and mindsets separate product leaders from average ones, and how you helping product managers level up to be a great product leader.
Yeah. So, we talked about some of the mind shifts that I had gone through, which is shifting from, problem focus to people focus, from, a team focus to a company focus, from managing team members to team leaders. But yeah, so let me talk about
Yeah.
the program I have. So, what one of the challenges is, as I said, nobody teaches people these leadership skills. And I see incredible PMs get left behind or spend years trying to break into leadership. There's a name for it actually. They call it the product leader canyon, and that jump from senior PM to, let's say, group product leader is there's a huge gap, and it's one of the hardest to cross. And so in this program, I personally one on one teach senior PMs over the course of months all the things that I've learned and that they need to become leaders. And I kind of wrap it up into sort of three things. So the first thing is they have to actually understand what it takes to reach the next level so that they can identify their gaps, the gaps they have to fill. And even here, like how many PMs out there have had a conversation with their manager, a career conversation? Hey, what does it take to get to the next level? And you get vague or ambiguous answers. Or, sometimes they'll give you the PM ladder for your company, but it's like paragraphs of text and you can't really parse it. And at the end of it, you kind of don't have an idea still of what you're supposed to do. And so the first thing I do is, I walk through a very simplified, optimized version of the ladder and I calibrate exactly where people are based on my years of experience sitting on promo committees and calibration committees. Once they do that, then we identify, what skills they have to close. So, for example, how to scale, how to think strategically, how to influence, and then I actually, help them close those gaps with precision. And I'd say the third thing that I do is even if you have the right, you've identified your gaps, you've closed your gaps. Here's the hard truth: there's not a lot of leadership opportunities in product. Like product orgs are small. There's just not a lot of layers in product orgs compared to, let's say, engineering orgs. And so when those opportunities come up, you have to be ready. You have to have all the skills, which is what I do. But you also have to stand out. And so I think the third thing that folks should do, and I do in my program, is how do you position yourself? How do you build that brand? How do you build that visibility, like we talked about with the thank you notes, so that when those leadership roles open, you're the one that they look to lead. Did that
Yeah, no,
answer your
absolutely.
question?
And for this, looks like it's personalized coaching for people who are listening to this podcast. How many students are you taking up, and who would be the right fit for this
Yeah.
coaching plan?
Yeah. I mean, I can only take on a couple students at a time because it's extremely high touch. It's you're not gonna talk to me and then get passed to someone else. It's literally me teaching you one on one
Yep.
over video call. So I can only take a few clients at a time. I target
Okay.
it to senior PMs. These are people who they're good at what they do, that they know what they're doing. They want to be a leader, but they either have spent years or they don't want to spend years trying to absorb and learn the hard way, all these skills they need to become a leader. And so I typically work with senior PMs with 7 to 11 years of experience. But I'll actually work with people who are earlier in their PM career. I wish I knew half this stuff when I was starting out. You know, my career trajectory would be insanely different if I had. So I'd say if they're PMs who are earlier than senior PM but they're ambitious, the stuff I teach can really set you up. So that's generally who
Got
I
it.
target.
And Roshan, obviously, I want to talk about AI. So what happened after in the last 2 years is
Yeah.
we've got a lot of AI tools. I've used tools like Bolt, Versal, Replit, but with all these new tools like Lovable, Cursor, and the others which I mentioned, how should product managers upskills themselves to be relevant? And where do you see the future of PM
Yeah.
going to be with all these AI tools coming in?
Yeah. I mean, AI is interesting. It's incredible. It's powerful. I think at Google, we already saw some of the benefits before it kind of came out so
Yeah.
publicly with ChatGPT. Google was pretty far ahead, but I think they were holding back a bit going public because there were a lot of ethical concerns. But what I'll say is this: at the end of the day, AI is a tool, and tools are only
True.
useful if you use them the right way. So, like, AI can be a massive accelerant. So, in my business, I have to create content, and writing copy and writing articles is hard for me. So, I use AI. It gets me, 60 to 80% of the way there, and it's incredible. It saves me so much time. I also use it sometimes to just think through things. I'll just, have a conversation with it, and it's just like soundboarding with someone. So I think AI can be an amazing tool, but what I'll say is, the key fundamentals of being a PM, they don't change. Like ultimately, you have to be, I mean, so much of being a PM is empathy for the user and an intuition that I don't think AI has right now.
Yeah.
Certainly not the empathy part. And so those key fundamentals don't change. If you want to be a great PM, AI is still only going to get you so far. So that's my recommendation is, use it as a tool, use it to automate tasks that are, taking you a long time, but, focus on those fundamentals, on talking to users, recognizing pain points, leading with empathy. I'd say the biggest thing is if you want to survive in a world with AI, like
Yeah.
invest in upskilling yourself. So, whether that's, learning by playing around or prototyping. The key difference between a good PM and a great PM are those that invest in their craft and hone their craft. So I'd say, invest in yourself, use AI as a tool, but don't become
Got
dependent
it.
on it.
And Roshan, you
Sorry, my light went out, so I'm moving
yeah,
another
no
light
worries.
closer.
Roshan, you work with Meta, you work with Google, and I'm sure a lot of product leaders, I mean commercial leaders in from companies like Amazon and Apple and all. Who do you think would win the AI war, if there is like a war? But who do you think is the best adapted to really take the AI into the product and really go to the next level?
Yeah, this is a big question. Who's going to win
Yeah.
the AI wars?
Yeah.
Hopefully not AI, because then we're all screwed. But I think it's hard to predict, and that's not a cop out. The reason I say it's hard to predict is I think there's so many discoveries yet to be made that ChatGPT came out with something and it was incredible. Then suddenly Google came out with something and it was incredible. And then Apple released Apple Intelligence. It's okay. And then suddenly
Yeah.
DeepSeek just came out and everyone's doesn't know what to do. And the truth is, I think any company that seems like they're ahead, there's people like nipping at their heels, and there's just so
Yeah.
much to discover and do that I don't think there'll be a clear winner. It's just going to be like growing the pie and just moving full steam ahead. I think it'll be more interesting later on to see where this evolves. Like I'll give you some prediction or some principles. ChatGPT is an incredible AI system. I use it all the time, as well
Yeah.
as Google Gemini. But ChatGPT is kind of standalone AI. Google has AI, but they have an entire ecosystem of
True.
products we use every day. We use Google Maps, we use Google Docs, we use Google Slides, we use Gmail. We use so many products. And AI is a novelty if it doesn't actually do something to make your life easier. And so for Google, it's much easier to take all the amazing things coming out of AI and funnel it. They got to be smart about it, but funnel it into these activities they already have touch points with us and make them better, make them more intuitive, make them magical. ChatGPT can have amazing AI, but translating that into things that affect us every day is a bit harder. And so I do see a challenge with ChatGPT at that point. But right now, we're not in the just applying AI, we're
Yeah.
just in the discovery phase. And so I think
Yeah.
it's a
No,
toss
I
up
mean,
at this point.
really exciting times. Let's see where the opportunity lands for us. But I quickly want to do the top three. What's your favorite business book?
Yeah. So my favorite business book, it might be cringe, but it's
Yeah.
4 Hour Work Week. And I read this like 16,
Well,
17 years ago. And it's controversial because the book can seem to be extreme or exaggerated. But for me, the point of the book was breaking you out of old patterns of thinking and imagining what's possible. And honestly, I've used a lot of the tools I got from there to
yeah.
make huge career leaps. I used a lot of the tools to make this big move to Portugal. So, you know, maybe it's a cliche book to choose, but it made a huge difference
No,
for
it's
me in
also
my
one of my
life.
favorite books, and because of Tim Ferriss, I started this podcast. So we're going to put that in the show notes. Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Um,
There you go. All right,
yeah.
we're
Yeah,
fans.
absolutely. And if you could go back in time when you started Amplify PM, what is the one thing you would have focused on or done anything differently?
One thing I would have focused on, I kind of talked about it, like what should PMs, ideally do to grow, and frankly to beat AI. It's to invest in my craft. So, today I coach PMs one on one through workshops and courses, and I save them significant time. And, those that invest in honing their craft go on to have, insane career trajectories. And I wish I had taken advantage of these kind of programs in the past. I do now. I take a ton of coaching, and there's that old proverb: the best time to plant a tree was 20
Yeah,
years ago, but
yeah.
the second best time is now. So, that advice I would give to myself, I'm taking it now, which is invest in coaching, invest in improving yourself, invest in upskilling because
Yeah,
it
no,
pays
absolutely. And
off.
do you have any favorite online tools, for example, Gmail, Slack, Zoom, ChatGPT?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I grew up in
Hmm.
the online world, so there's so many things I use. But I'd say my favorite
Yeah.
was Evernote,
Okay.
and now
Yeah.
it's Notion. But to me, one of the biggest challenges facing, frankly, humankind, but let's narrow it down to product managers,
Yeah.
is information overload. There's so much information. We talked in the beginning about Portugal and its PM community. Like they have so much information, which could be both a
Yeah.
blessing and a curse. And so for me, like dealing with that information overload is critical. And without Evernote and now Notion, like I couldn't survive and thrive if I didn't have a way to manage that
Yeah, no, absolutely. I
information.
think Notion is also one of my favorite tools. We'll put that in show notes. Roshan, what's the best way people can reach out to you and know more about Amplify PM?
Yeah. The best way to reach out is you can go to my site, AmplifyPM.com, and you can contact me there or connect with me on LinkedIn. I love to connect with people and, you know,
Yeah,
hope
no,
to meet you
absolutely. We'll
there.
put that in show notes. Roshan, thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us. I really enjoyed my conversation with you.
Ah, me too. I appreciate it.